Good evening.
Good evening.
I
We
am
resilient.
Mikey.
We war.
Yes, I'm fully Mike, aka Big Mike Geary, aka Mike Geary, founder of Hellfish Haven and Travis Partington of Oscar Mike Radio. Actually, I get a little Oscar Mike swag here. I don't know if we can see it because the Kool-Aid behind it is dark, but I got your
Nice,
thermos.
nice.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Best way to drink, purple Kool-Aid is to, drinking an Oscar Mike Radio cup.
There you go.
And we're here with another, weekly edition of WAR happenings and goings in the veteran community. We just had another this past weekend, a coffee and camaraderie at the VFW in North Attleboro.
Nice.
Had some folks come in there for the first time, able to share, some resources with some new people, talk about some ideas for the future. And it's just really good to see like how it grows and, and changes. But, it's weird to see what the good times are for these events and what the tough times are. Because like right now, you're still in ski season. People go away for the weekends and things like that. So you don't get as much as you do, come like, March and, April when people are more bound to be in the area. And
well, nice. I mean, it is true. It's a drab time of year. I really believe the sunlight starts affecting people, the lack thereof. And this has just been, we've had the snowy winter in 2015 and 2016, but I don't remember it being like this punishingly cold for the sustained amount of time. Like, man, every time I turn around, you have the high today is 14 degrees with the low -3. That's before the wind chill. And, if you're working Boston like I do, that wind tunnel down Federal Street is like punishment.
Oh my goodness, it is. And, even if you go over like by North Station and like you're walking up and down the streets, like you go down one street and you're perfectly fine. The buildings are in the right position, but then you turn down the next road and it's just you're full burst. You feel that that wind chill down to -10.
It's just crazy. So people get kind of down, people get kind of out, and you kind of get into your own little space. And it's I try to be like, we just got 4 more weeks. Just give me 4 more weeks, and we can get through the bad stuff and then get to the good stuff.
Well, did the groundhog see a shadow or not?
I don't know. I don't pay attention. I mean,
no.
Anyway,
either way is Lefty's saying, -10. He's still wearing shorts to the mailbox.
Oh, I'll do that. I mean, I can do that, but it's walking down Federal Street in shorts, not advisable.
Yeah. And then we got this month is the 20th anniversary of my first tour in Iraq. And on day 12 during our relief in place transfer of authority, we were in a location that we thought was secure. And as we were going through the area, we had gone previously down this area. We're going to do a convoy live fire training, get familiar because we had gotten trained on, 50 cals. And then when we got to the area that we're going to be in, we were told we're going to have 240 Bravos instead. So we had to, go and, get ourselves, familiar with the weapon system that we're going to have on top of the Humvee. And so we did, our qualification tables with the tombstones. But, you've got the paper target, but it's, you fire the tombstone, 10 shots, 20 shots, and then you've got everything. So we did our qual, and then we're going to do a live fire because we had some metal trash barrels set up in the open, and we're going to use those as targets. The convoy commander would call it up, and as we drove by, we would engage. We drove down the area, did like a little route reconnaissance, saw where we're going to be, and then we came back to do it again. As we're going down, the first ID lieutenant called over the net and said, "Hey, we're going to take the lead on this." And so my vehicle was initially the lead victor, and the sergeant, my vehicle told us to pull over. The LT took lead, and then when they took the right into the off road of the street that we were on, so we could turn around and come back on the convoy live fire. They hit a anti-tank landmine that had been placed in the tracks that, like I said, about 5-10 minutes before, we had just our vehicle had just gone down and made. So obviously somebody was out there, watching us and set this up for us to, have us get hit. And it was just, it was wild for us because, this is, day 12 of us, in the, the relief in place, the transport authority. And it's like, it was our first smack. Hey, no bullshit. You're actually, this is war. And, we sat out there, which was crazy too. Cause, like I said, we're in day 12. So, most of the stuff is still run by 1st Infantry Division, but some of it 42nd Infantry, has, signed for some of the gear, but not all of it. So when we called up for support to say, hey, we've got a disabled vehicle and we got 5 guys, we can't fit in the other vehicles to, get back to base. One company saying, oh, well, just stay out there overnight. We'll get, a record crew to you tomorrow. And we're like, we got guys that are just, been, engaged with a vehicle that had, been hit by an anti-tank landmine. The entire, part of the engine had been blown off. And they're telling us, oh, don't worry about it, just come back, it'll be fine. You guys will be good. And it just, it blew my mind that they were going to let us stay out there like that. And then, First ID was like, we don't have any vehicles anymore. We signed them all over to the 42nd, so we can't come out and get you guys. And then finally, we called the division, the DTAC, which the general we worked for, he was the division general for maneuver. So he was close with the DTAC guys, and they threw together like a hodgepodge crew to put together a convoy to come out and pick us up. So they finally got out there, like about 10 to 12 hours after the initial contact. And they get out there, meet up with us. We, transfer bodies so that way everybody's into a seat so we can convoy back. And to show you how, new these guys were and how, green everything was, as we're driving back, we get a call from one of the guys in the vehicles and says, hey, we're out of gas. And, luckily
And believe
for
it or
us,
not, people, that happens a lot more than you think it does. You would think that, hey, no. If the fuel guy decided you only need, 50 gallons to get where you need to go, that's all you're getting. They don't top you off.
yep. And, the big thing too that we saw too was, these guys, like I said, they'd thrown together this mission, came together last minute to be able to come get us and, to be able to get us back to the base. And, we stripped down the vehicle of any sensitive items, took out the Blue Force tracker, took out the radios, took out the ComSat, took out, everything that could, would be bad, to fall into, enemy hands. And then, they wanted us to sit on this vehicle for the next day, for the record to get out there. But, we decided to convoy back with the other crew. And there was a base close by that the tower could, keep eyes on the destroyed vehicle. And how they had that set up and, how we drove back, we wound up using one of our fuel cans because our trucks were set up. We had 2 fuel cans on the back of every truck to make sure if the situation happened that we would get it. So, you just grab the donkey dick and, put it on top of the fuel container, and we were able to, add the fuel into the Humvee so that way we could get those guys back to the base. So, it started out them rescuing us and then us, getting them, through the convoy to get them back to the base. But it was just wild, that, our companies both said, there's nothing that we can do. You guys just gotta stay out there. And it was that point that we knew that, we were part of the MP company, but being attached to the general and being attached to the headquarters element, that this tour was going to be, a pissing contest back and forth between, who's actually supposed to help us and who's actually supposed to, take care of us.
And God forbid you guys get attacked or something while you're out there waiting for the record to show up or fuel,
And like I said, we had sent, all these vehicles, basically full. So we couldn't take another 5 passengers that were in that initial, truck that got downed to be able to, take them and bring them back to base with us. And it was crazy to me that, the next day they did go out there and get the vehicle. I'm gonna see if I can pull up a picture of the vehicle real quick to show you. But it was nuts, one of the guys was awarded Purple Heart. He bashed a couple vertebrae in his neck.
Wow.
We still are trying to fight for the other guys because, it should have been, more than just one. I'm gonna go on Flickr to find the image. It's funny because there was a picture of the vehicle, blown up, and Everlast, he had a song called Letters Home from the Garden of Stone.
Yep.
And with that video, all of a sudden I looked at my Flickr and I saw that the picture had been taken, all of a sudden it went from, like 10 views on the picture to like 500 plus views on the picture. And then, 23 seconds or something into the music video, they're using our photo. So I was kind of bummed that, there was no reaching out and saying anything. Hey guys, we're going to use your photo for this video. But, it was kind of neat to see, something that, happened to us in a picture, from our tour in 2005 to be in a music video. Because the whole music video and the song was about, riding home from, being, in combat and, being overseas. All right. I'm going to download the picture now. I can show everybody. I'm going to show 2 pictures. The first one's going to be, the vehicle itself.
Yeah.
And then the next one will be the vehicle and the tire. And you'll see how far away the tire blew off. Like you say, the V cut of the up armored Humvee, it did what it was supposed to do, in that it it took care of the soldiers inside the vehicle, making sure there wasn't a mass casualty. But it did it did substantial damage to the engine, making that vehicle inoperable and down for the future. All right, so now I'm going to do media overlay, add 1, 2, 3. All right. So the first one here is going to be the vehicle itself. So that was the vehicle after being hit. And then this is the vehicle, and you can see the tire all the ways down. That was about, I'd probably say between 200, meters away, probably.
Wow. There's no surviving it, is there, man?
There's the top view looking down.
Man.
And again, you look at, the way the Humvee was and the cut of it, the fact that it had that V-shaped cut, was made it so everybody was able to survive in that.
Wow.
because we had so what happened, I was the vehicle behind it. We got hit with, the the shrapnel and everything that came, off of their truck, hit our truck. I was up in the turret, so I was knocked out for a second. And I learned that First ID had their TTP for if somebody goes unconscious is to punch them in the balls to make sure they're good and they come back. So all of a sudden, my head hit the metal, like we had little pieces of, put together strap up on top of the Humvee to protect the turret, protect the gunner a little bit. And I was above that. So when the blast initially went off, it knocked me out. And then, I came back to with the sergeant from First ID just giving me a square, punching the nads. And then, first off, I'm pissed because, I'm getting hit in the balls and, and then, just trying to figure out what's going on. And we're watching the other vehicle, I got my field of fire, in front of me. We're waiting to see if anything moves. And all of a sudden we see, a door open from the Humvee and the lieutenant gets out and, he was right there in the TC seat, right where the tire ran over the anti-tank landmine. And it was just, once he came out and, once another door opened and they started pulling the other passengers out, it was, you could breathe for a second. You would, we were able to know that, these guys were, they may not have been, in perfect shape. Like I said, some of these guys are due a Purple Heart and, one guy already has his. And, the other guys, we're going to resubmit and put together the packet before he gets out of the military because the first one was denied because he got hit by the radios. He had cuts all up and down his legs.
Wow.
Back then in 2005, they didn't count a concussion as qualifier for Purple Heart. So that got changed later on during the War on Terror because that was a signature war, a signature wound from our war was traumatic brain injury, was concussions. So they did change the regulation and updated it so that a blast and a concussion from a blast did rate a Purple Heart. So we're hoping to be able to get these guys resubmitted and get that award to them for what they endured.
And you're seeing this up close, man. What's going through your mind as you're seeing this?
Well, for me, as I watched it and saw it happen, like, I just thought, a couple of my friends were just, gone. Like, for me, for that blast to knock me out for a couple of seconds, it must have been that much more, an impact on them in the vehicle. And, I'm waiting and waiting and waiting and hoping that, there's some movement in the vehicle. And then to see, like I said, when that door opened and they started coming out slowly, I could finally, breathe a little bit. And then at that point, the sergeant hands up the mic and, I have to call up QRF and tell them, what just happened. And, I'm calling over the net trying to get a hold of them. We're in, it was called Midland Range. It was like a little mountain range in the middle of Iraq that we were at doing this. So comms weren't that great. We weren't able to get a hold of them on the SINGARs. So we had to go on the Blue Force tracker and send a message to them that way. And that's how we were able to reach them and, let them know, hey, we're secure in place. But, we need somebody from our company to come and get us. And that's when we started getting the pushback. But that, that event and seeing how it happened, like, I would reach back and contact, and let the folks know behind me what was happening and say, hey, I just got a hold of somebody on the net. This is what they said. So that way, one of the leaders could come and make the call of what to do next. And it was crazy because you saw how people actually reacted to the event. And, as much as you train for things and as hard as people are, or as worried of how you're going to think people are going to act in combat, like it really, your training does kick in, and your, that repetition of doing it time and time again, that muscle memory that you get, it really does kick in. And like some guys that you thought were going to be so hard and so tough in war, all of a sudden are screaming and losing their mind. And it's like, you got to be taken aside and, calm down, take a breath, we got a good situation here, let's not make it, crazy. And other guys that you thought were, just these, lost in the sauce, we're going to be a lost cause, turned up to be, Johnny on the spot. We're able to, keep their calm, keep their composure, and get out there and get what needed to be done. Like I said, we had to field strip that vehicle, take out the AT4, take out the, the launchers, take out all of our, everything that we had inside the vehicle that was sensitive, all the ammo, take out all the, the radios, the Blue Force tracker, the antenna, anything that we didn't want to get into, the enemy's hands, we had to get out of the vehicle before we could, go and leave and go back to the OP that was, up the road from where we were. And even, that OP, wasn't set up for, people to stay the night, that was a station attached to another base that they would send people out to work for, 12 hours. And then another crew would come out to work for 12 hours. And, they would just send rotating guys out there. So they just had the basics, it was a couple of guard towers. It was, one building that, had a couple of offices in it. And that was it. It wasn't set up for, there's no chow hall. There's no, sleeping facility. There's no barracks, it was literally, just out there to be an observation post. And so even, going onto that, place, we were secure, enough inside of that area. But again, we had just gotten hit just outside of it, with, them putting an anti-tank landmine in our tracks. We didn't know what else was going to happen. And as it got darker, as it became night, I'm using my NVGs and I can start seeing people walking, in the mountain range. And that's when, I called down into the guys in the truck, and, the lieutenant made the call. We got to go back to the base.
Wow.
But, like I said, and that'll be, 20 years on the 8th.
It's hard to realize when you look back, right, that, you say 20 years as if it were nothing, but you were in your 20s when that happened. It wasn't like like a whole lot was coming at you in a short amount of time at a young age. And it's just, when you think about everything you've gone through, in some ways I tell people, you live more life in 4 years or 8 years if you don't retire from the military than most people live in their lifetime. It's really something else.
Yeah. And like for me, I had just turned, 21 a month before. And it was, that was my, we started that tour in July 2004. We did our mandatory training, check the box stuff. And then we went and got qualified to do the protective service training. So we went down to Fort Leonard Wood. We got, the additional skill identifier to be protective service agents, and to do that, for the mission that we were on. And so our whole platoon went down and did that. I unfortunately had to go with my lieutenant, and he wound up getting pulled off the mission. Bless you.
Excuse me.
He got pulled off the mission because he was like, he kept butting heads with the generals. They're like, they had an officer aide and they had an enlisted aide, and like those guys were the ones that ran the day-to-day operations for the generals. And we would fit in as the protective service team, and we would let them know, hey, this is a mission that we should probably drive, this is a mission that we should probably fly for, and then how many people, how we do it, how long it would take, we put that in. But our lieutenant kept butting heads with the officer aide for the general, and they just said, nope, you're not even going to be on the mission. Go ahead and go work in the map printing office for the rest of the tour. And so I went down to school with him, and like it was nice because it was a gentleman's course. So you would go to you do your 9 to 6, 9 to 8, whatever the course was, and then you had the nights to yourself, and you could do what you need to do. And then because we had the hotel set up for the two of us, he had met friends or whatever down there, so he would take off every night. I got to keep the rental car, so I got to be able to go explore. I was able to go to minor league baseball game on the weekends, able to check out areas and go have restaurant dinners and things like that, and like just enjoy the area, because the last time I was at Fort Leonard Wood was during basic and AIT, our advanced RMP school, and I did that all in one shot. So it was, I just did the 4 months of, basic and into military police school. And like during that, you had, 1-2 day pass to see the area outside of the base. And this
wow.
time, going down there for this course, I actually got to, see the area and, actually enjoy the, what was around the base versus, last time. And it was just,
as you're doing that, what's going through your mind? I mean, because it's my understanding some of those bases got mortared every day. People were always trying to circumvent the bases.
Yeah. So we were the base we were at into crit that we started at Fob Danger. And we went from Danger, and then a couple months before the tour was over, we moved to Fob Spiker, which was named after Captain Spiker, who was the missing in action from Desert Storm. I believe they actually found his body later on during OIF, and so we were able to actually bring him home. But he was one of the missing in action, Captain Spiker, that the base was named after there in Tikrit. But Fob Danger, we had everything that happened on that base. We had mortar rounds. These guys tried launching grenades over the base. The vehicle-borne IEDs at the gate. There was one morning at the Tiger Gate, it was called, and a V-bid came and crashed into the gate and blew up, and it was such an intense explosion. It literally knocked us out of the beds we were laying in, and it shattered the plexiglass windows in the building. So the next day, we were out there, taking sand, filling up sandbags, so that way we could, sandbag the windows and, replace the glass and the windows to keep the general safe and to keep our building, fortified. And like on base, you always had to, if you're wearing your desert uniform, you had to still have your helmet on, because there was so much incoming that, you were at a higher level every time, you walked around. And it would, that base was hit a lot. Like I said, whether it was the people at the entry control point getting hit with the vehicle-borne IEDs, or the mortar rounds coming in, the rockets being launched. And like when we got down to Baghdad on the second tour, they had the mitigation systems that would sometimes shoot them out of the air as it came in and then hit. And it just it was crazy to see the difference, how much, we got better at defending ourselves as the tours grew on, going from, 04, 05 to 7, 8 to 9, 10, it just kept getting better. Like the last one in 2008, I think it was Easter weekend, it was something like 108 rockets hit the base in 2 days.
Get out.
And so it was like every couple of minutes, we're trying to, it's about a 5-minute walk to get from like the barracks to the chow hall. And it would take up to 40 minutes to get there, because, the alarm would go off, incoming. And you go into the bunker and you wait for the all clear. And then, you continue to walk, and then a couple steps more, and, more rounds are coming down. And, luckily, only 2 people were injured with all those rounds that hit the base. Only 2 people sustained casualties during that. And it's just, I don't know if it's luck, or if it just, it was bad firing on the enemy side. But we were very fortunate to be able to, endure those times and those attacks and not have anything bad happen. Like, there are some videos out there of, of some of the times that rockets hit the base where like you would see like some of the sandbags would blow up and it would just be dust everywhere. And like the fog of everything that's happening, you don't know what's going on. And like for that to happen and, for nobody to be, critically, wounded was just, knowing that there's some higher being, protecting us.
That's wild, man. That is wild.
And then just let
because you're living it every day.
JGC we're just going off the cuff, talking about a couple years ago, not a couple years ago, 20 years ago, I was on my first tour, OIF3 with 42nd ID. And then the second tour was with the 972 Military Police Company. We were in Baghdad. And then the third tour in Iraq, I was out in Anbar province. We started out at base that was over by the Syrian border, Kop Ubaidi, and then we moved to the big air base to be out there, Al-Assad Air Base, which is also known as Camp Cupcake, because it had a pool, it had the best gym that you see even stateside. You don't have gyms that nice, and
Wow.
like they had like a movie theater, a nice a fully built track, like the soccer stadium. Like it was a real nice air base, and that's one of the places there are still U.S. troops today. Like when you saw like a year or two ago that a base had been hit in Iraq, it was Al-Assad Air Base, and like for us when we first got there in that tour, the 2009-2010 tour, it was a Marine Corps base, and then the Army, we took over for them. And like as soon as it went from Marine Corps led to Army led, it's like the stupid shit machine, became full in effect, and took away all the ways that the Marine Corps tried to make the base more livable for people and try to make it, not so much a suck position to be in. The Marines really made it, your time on mission was your time on mission, and your time, off mission was yours. It was yours to, be able to go to the MWR, to be able to watch a movie, to be able to, go on the computers, to, to Skype with people at home, to be able to, to do those things. They really, one thing I was envious of the Marine Corps for was the way that they took care of their soldiers, their Marines and their lives outside of the military, making sure that they, had that time for both, their time on mission and then their time to be themselves and to, decompress. The Army tries to be more regimented and tries to make sure that, they schedule your time and, you have your mandatory fun, and like, it wouldn't be like, hey, there's going to be softball this weekend. It'd be like, nope, everybody's going to go play softball on Saturday, So that was
it's interesting to hear it that way. And, I didn't serve in combat, so I don't understand what that's like, but, it's hard to believe, 20 years later, it's still fresh in your mind the way it is.
Absolutely. Like in things like this, like, you look back at like how the brain works and how, memories are impacted, and like, these events, like that day, everything is so clear in that day still. Like, I can still, see myself inside the truck. I can still, see the lieutenant coming around us and, taking that turn onto the ground, and like, the seconds before it happening, and like how fresh that was. And, even, the different events that happened on the base, with the rockets and the mortars. And, we were fortunate too that, on that first tour, we had a kid as we were driving, we were going out to this bridge that was over by an oil field, and they kept blowing up the bridge to stop them from being able to get to the oil field and to be able to produce. So we flew out there, and like we set up like a hasty LZ, so that way the boss and the other bird could land, and they'd be able to take the couple Humvees up and go check out the area, see what they needed to do, and then the boss would go wheels up with the bird again, and they would take off back to the base, and we convoy back. And so we did that 2 days in a row. And the first day we went out there, I saw a kid out in the desert. He was just out there by himself. His dad was a couple yards away from him. and I threw my stuffed animal, and didn't think anything of it. That's what I did. Is up in my turret, I would have my ammo, my rifle. For a little while, we had the AT4, and then I've got my 9 on my leg, and then I've got my 240, and so I would also have a little area where I had stuffed animals, where I would toss to the kids as we went into the cities, or we went into areas that we hadn't been before, to be able to try to create that connection with the people, try to have that connection with the local national, saying we understand we're impeding on your country, we understand this isn't what you want, and that a lot of these people that are fighting against us aren't actually even from Iraq. A lot of foreign fighters had fled into the country to fight us. So we just wanted to make sure that folks knew that we were there not to be a nuisance, but to do what we need to do and get out. And so one of those ways that I did that part was to be able to give the stuffed animals to the kids as we saw them, because the kids are innocent at all. They're not out there plotting and planning against us. So I just tried to do a reach out to them through the stuffed animals. We had folks back home sending us boxes of them, so that way we were always supplied. And like I said, we threw it out to them first day. The next day we came back. All of a sudden, there's little kids in the road waving us down. I yelled down to my team leader, Billy D. I'm like, Billy, that's the kid from yesterday. We need to stop. He's like, Mikey, are you sure? I'm like, 100%. So Billy gets out and grabs the kid by the hand. The kid goes, no English. And Billy's like, no Arabic. The kid brings him over to the side of the road and starts dusting off a 155 round. And then Craig saying, what's up, gents? Happy New Year. Keep up the great work. And so 155 round, the kid starts dusting off on the side of the road. We grab the kid, throw him in our truck. We cordon off the area, set up, a 360 around it. We call up EOD. So the Air Force was the EOD in that area. So they came out, a couple hours later because, they had to finish playing Madden or whatever. And the Air Force EOD guys, they get out there, they take out their robot, they send him down to, go check out the 155 round. They see the 155 round. They also see that it's got some cords running to it. So now it's daisy chained to another 155, daisy chained to a third 155, daisy chained to a fourth 155. So there's 4 155s daisy chained exactly in the distance that we had between our vehicles, like the 100 meters between the first and second, the 25 between second and third, and then the 50 between the third and fourth. So they had definitely, watched us operate the day before and that morning, and, had set that up for us. And if we had gone any further on that road, there was a saw blade. If we connected the saw blades together, it would have detonated.
Wow.
So it was a pressure plate IED. And like I said, it was daisy chained with a 4, so would all 4 of them would hit. So the Air Force, the robot went out there and it got everything together and it detonated in place. And you watch the big plume of smoke go up, and you're like, just thinking that that could have been us in the middle of it, and all 16 of us probably would have been killed or seriously wounded from that. It's 4 155 rounds, no joke.
No. I mean, even one. They call it danger close for a reason.
And and what's kind of cool is years later on Twitter, there's a EOD captain that posts on Twitter often, and we'll ask folks to hey, post a picture of this, post a picture of this. And one day I posted a picture of the Air Force EOD with the little robot, and I just asked, can somebody explain this to me? And I got a direct message from one of the guys on the team that actually came out and detonated that for us. And he's like, was this outside, the base Basra, and I was like, yeah, and after we talked for a minute and, found out, they're Bob Summerall and they were in this area, that it was his team that came out and did the detonation for us and did the robot. And, it was just kind of cool to connect to him, 17, 18 years later to be able to, know the people that, came out and, took care of the situation for us. And then, of course, for us, our luck continued that day with a flat tire about 10 minutes down the road after we started, back on mission. We popped the flat, so we had to, get the truck up. And, getting a tire change on a Humvee is, no easy task. So it's, you get 3 or 4 guys out there, jacking it up. Each of these tires, a couple 100 pounds.
Yeah.
And then, you get it back on and we continue mission. But, from that day going to be, just a regular day securing an LZ to, to seeing a kid that, had we not given him that teddy bear the day before, Woody had been out there to talk to us and to share, his story, to tell us the bomb on the side of the road, So that's one thing that, we shared and got published in a thing called the First 100 Days. It was like a manual that went out to units that were deploying to say, hey, this is something that we learned from our lessons. If you, help out the kids, they can be, on your side. And, just that, also, learning more Arabic too, also, helped further along on, subsequent tours to be able to, to have that talk, and having interpreters available, because, we weren't able to do much except, take the kid in and, whatever we had in the truck at that point, candy bars, Gatorades, everything. We were like, here you go, have more, thank you. Just, so grateful for, him stopping us. And it was just wild, like I said, we had that fortune on that tour of things like that happening. Even there was a time we were driving down the road and we drove by, an area, and then, 30 seconds after we're driving by, we see the explosion in the rear view. So, an IED was meant for us, but, whether it's the jammers that we had on the trucks or what, just stopped it and, it detonated, afterwards.
Wow.
Because a lot of the times they would set them up with the cell phone. So they would call the cell phone and the cell phone would detonate the IED. But this one, it detonated, it detonated towards the off the road instead of towards the road. And, it detonated after we drove by it. So, we're very fortunate on that tour. We did over 10,000 miles on the road that tour. Because, like I said, we were with the general for maneuver, and his philosophy was, if it's 2 hours or less convoy, we're going to do it. If it was more than a 2-hour convoy, then we would do a Black Hawk. We'd fly to where we need to go. And so that was always fun too, because, you're flying in and, you go the first couple times and you learn what it's like to fly. As you come to the high tension wires, they come up and they go down real quick. You kind of lose your stomach for a second, like on a roller coaster. This one time we were flying up and we had this female reporter that was going to be up there. And all of a sudden you see her just turn white and she opens up her blouse and just pukes down it. And I was like, that was the only time that I thought I was going to lose it, on the bird. I pulled off my glove and I'm holding it in front of my mouth. And I'm like, just watching her get sick made me want to get sick. But besides that, I loved being in the Blackhawks. If you sat in one seat too, it was like the hurricane seat where you open your mouth, it was like the kids in the movies, the cheeks flapping and everything. And there's just so much force of how it goes when you have the doors open. Then on the other side, it was just completely separate. So it was a really cool tour on that first one to be able to experience all that. And it helped me to be a leader on the second tour. And, on the third tour, to be able to pass on the things that, were given to me from my sergeants on the first tour, to be able to then be the sergeant on the second tour and the staff sergeant on the third tour, and, sergeant first class on my last.
You earned that experience.
It's just, it's one of those things that, they really, they show, how the backbone, of everything is the NCO Corps, and, it truly is, you really see that, the officers, this is your mission, get it done. And, your NCOs make sure that, you're trained and you've got the equipment, for me, the tough part was, once you get to that, the sergeant first class, once I was a platoon sergeant, that I'm not in the mission so much anymore. That, I'm taking care of making sure they got the stuff they need, the beans and bullets, and, make sure that everybody's trained and make sure everybody's got the stuff they need. And, I'm also there to take the ass doing so they don't have to.
Yeah.
And then we got Oscar Mike coming up. That went by really quick.
Yeah, time flies.
Mhm.
Yeah, I gotta get ready for my show here in a couple minutes. I have Will Person on. He was an Olympic bobsledder. Didn't serve in the military, but he was in the on the Olympic team for bobsledding for like 9 years, and he started having problems. A lot of his fellow bobsledders did, and there's a correlation between bobsledding and CTE and PTSD like symptoms. And so he talks about meeting with some Air Force pilots, and they talk about some of the strain the G forces put on their bodies. And it makes sense because I've talked to a couple other people who, where PTSD might not be because of something you saw or experienced. It might be because you've been by a 105 millimeter howitzer for 8 years, dealing with that shock wave and it's affecting your brain, or mortar or grenades or constant, pound of a, you and I both know an M240 Golf. There's more variants now, but that's the good thing I shot. It's a concussive thing that you have to endure. And so he's trying to make hyperbaric oxygen therapy like in your home available to veterans and other people suffering with this. So it was a little bit of a different twist, but he has talked to people in the military and they understand where he's coming from. So, it's good stuff.
Excellent. And we had the Patriots in the Super Bowl again, this weekend.
Yeah.
Gonna see how a young buck quarterback, does on the big stage.
If he wins this one, he will, he won't be like Tom Brady, but he'll certainly be legendary. No one saw this coming.
Absolutely, and just all these different hype videos that are out now, and things going on, and people being upset about how easy the season was for for everybody and for the Patriots. And you can say that the season's easy and there's no challenge, but if you win the Super Bowl, nobody ever says that the season was easy. In the end, you're ultimately going against the best team of the one league against the best team of your league, and it's head to head at that point. So not a lot of people are giving the Patriots the odds right now. So I think we're I want to say 4-point underdogs was the last thing I saw.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting.
And then one last thing I wanted to share, thing I got going on right now. If you check out Hellfish Haven's Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn, we're sharing this, the February Firewatch. And each day we post a different saying and a different thing. I'm gonna see this real quick and show so we got this. This is what the main thing is, and then each day we share the different prompt. Like this, day 5 tactical patience. How can waiting time become a tactical pause? And just different things to engage the community, to share, and I got the whole thing set up. The February Firewatch is a manual you can download for the whole month, or you can just come in each day and check in and see what's going on and how to help, and just trying to share different ways with folks on on how to do things. And I figured February would be a good one where it's a short month to see how the engagement will work and and what to do on just trying new things to keep engagement going on and to grow the community.
All right.
We'll see you guys next week. Join Oscar Mike Radio.
We're WAR.
We are resilient, and we'll see you guys next week. Thank you.
All right.